Okay, it's now 20 past 1. I was thinking maybe we can begin the session. I see we have but two students who have joined us. So just continue with the session, then it will be recorded. And for those who are not able to attend, they will be able to get access to the recordings and to the material that you will share, Dr. Helen. So before I begin the session, my name is Lawrence Asani from the RCD Research Capacity Development Unit at the Postgraduate School. Can I just get a thumbs up if I'm audible enough? Okay, perfect. Okay, so before I begin the section, I would like to thank all the attendees who are here, obviously the two students who are here to join us, plus obviously our facilitator for today, Dr. Helen, for her efforts and preparing to give us this presentation. So before I begin the session, I would like to go over a few housekeeping rules. Please note that obviously the session, as I mentioned, that it will be recorded and all the materials will be posted on the model communities. And if you have any question for our facilitator during the workshop, you may raise your hand or you may type your question in the chat box, and I'll unmute your mic and indicate to the presenter so you may address your question. Also, I will post a feedback survey in the chat session. So we please request to fill it out so that we may gain insight on whether this workshop was useful and how we can improve in the future, as well as to provide some kind words for our facilitator. So before I begin the session, I would like to go over and introduce our facilitator today, Dr. Helen. So Dr. Helen currently works as a lecturer at the Department of Education and Curriculum Studies at the University of Johannesburg. She holds a PhD and Master's in Education and Curriculum Studies. She has worked on several national and international projects, including the TAO program, the SARIHE, and SENEX, with funding from ESRC, uh, NRF, and Department of Higher Education and Training, South Africa. Dr. Helen's research interest is in the learning experiences of students in higher education, with a keen focus on marginalized students and advancing the discourse of social justice in higher education and beyond. Other research areas include teacher professional development, curriculum development, policy evaluation, commerce education assessment. She has published some of her work in reputable journals and various national and international conferences. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our facilitator for today, Dr. Helen. You may proceed and begin the session, Dr. Helen. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for such a wonderful introduction. I was like, who's he talking about? No, I really appreciate it. Um, I'm going to begin my session now. I will just give me a minute.
Okay. I'll just stop sharing so that you can share your slides.
Sorry, I was just notifying colleagues that I'm at a session there. I will share my screen now. I hope you can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen. Can everybody else see her screen?
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it. You can just react with a thumbs up, or you can unmute your mic and say yes.
Yes, so maybe because it's
Okay.
only the two of us students, we're going to have a more informal conversation. So why not get to know each other? So my name is Helen, and who do we have in the room? I'm going to put on my mic first, my camera, and then just for you to get to know me, let me stop sharing first. It's good to Can you all put your camera on as well? Sorry, my glare is terrible. Who do we have? I see there's Cecilia, Roger, and we have Sitobile. Could you switch on your mic, please? Just to see you, if you don't mind.
You have allowed all the cameras and all the mics, so the one they can thingy the mic. So I am Lawrence Asani from the RCD unit. This is me.
Nice to see you, Lawrence.
Nice
Chandra,
to see
maybe
you.
they want to see you first. Cecilia, right? Could you, so that we know you're here, we want to know that we are talking to someone, or maybe they're not here. Zitobile, or can they not hear us?
Sure. Because they did type in the chat box. Cecilia did type that, yes, we can hear you when you're asked if you are audible enough.
Yeah, can you switch on your camera? We want to see you. Do you mind, Cecilia? And Zitobile?
Oh, there's Cecilia.
Yes, now I'm talking to someone. Yes, nice to see you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cecilia.
Okay.
Hi, Cecilia. Nice to
From
meet you.
Transportation and Supply Chain Department.
Nice. Thank you. And congratulations for making it to the Faculty of Education. What are you going to be pursuing?
Logistics management. PhD in logistics management.
All right. Lovely.
Yep.
And who else do we have?
I think they just left the chat.
Zitobile. All right, it's fine. Okay, I'll continue with you. No problem. We can now switch off our cameras. Yeah. Okay. So Cecilia, stop me at any time if you want some clarity, but I'll try to be as clear as possible. So of course, we are trying to focus the writing of proposal at the Faculty of Education, but this generally applies mostly with the few derivatives here and there, but the basics remains, and that is what I'll go through. I will go through the basics, and some of the elements of your proposals might be adapted by your supervisor to align to the requirement of your faculty. So I normally like to begin with this as you embark, see now you're in PhD. When you embark on this journey, that it's not going to be easy. You will have these moments where you feel you're doing it, think you're ready, and then you will be like, no, this is so hard. And then you will have a moment of inspiration, like, yeah, I can do it. And you will spike, you will make moves. But then in between again, you will feel like, no. I don't think, especially when you first start getting your rejection, maybe you get your reviews and you feel like you're not making progress, then you will really clench down, and then of course up and down. So it will be that up and down curve. And that is, I just like to be real with the students. Do not expect a straight line. It will not be a straight line. There'll be moments when you will be up, you'll be on top of the mountain. There will be moments where you will be even below the mountain. Underground, nobody will know what you're doing, but it is part of the journey. And enjoy the journey as you move along. Do not get dejected. All right. So of course, every faculty has a template that they follow for your proposal. So it's important for you as you begin, find out from your supervisor, what is your template? How does it look like? And if they want you to use that template. So that should be the first thing that you should be able to find and be able to see all the components. So I'm going to use our basic template at the Faculty of Education to guide us through some of the key aspects of our proposal. Then, of course, the other thing that we normally find, especially if you are doing any research, is the aspect of ethical clearance. I'm not so sure if this, because UJ is, and different departments are registered under the NHSRC, which is the mother body that oversees all the ethical principles of research in the country. So you might be required to do an ethical clearance module. So there is a free training. So this is because this presentation was for the Faculty of Education. So I'm assuming, so I had to prepare that. So each and every student is expected and is required to do this training. It's a free training online, and the link you should be able to receive with your supervisor. And I normally also provide the link because I do serve in the ethics committee. And then depending on where you're conducting your research, you will get ethics clearance from the university, because the university, once you get the ethical clearance certificate from the tree training, then you will be applying for your ethical clearance at the faculty. And then you might need another layer of clearance if you're going to conduct your study. In our case, we would conduct studies in school, so we might need a gatekeeper's letter from the Department of Basic Education. In your case, if you're doing your research in transport and logistics, you might need a gatekeeper's letter from the institution that you're going to interview or research on, if that is the angle you're going to take. But if you're only going to use secondary data, you may not need to do that. So it depends, but this is just for you to know exactly what is required. And then there'll be other layers in terms of you getting consent from people, but that you can discuss with your supervisor. But this is an important thing for you to know as you embark your study. Just know that this is part of the requirement that you are required to have ethical clearance before you conduct any study. But this only comes after you have your proposal and you already developed it and it has been approved by the department. Then they'll give you a go-ahead to apply for ethics clearance. So those are the links, but I can share them later. So usually, and again, I just like to give this brief indication that if you are doing your full dissertation, of course, you would be required to about a length of about 3,000 words, which is 15 to 20 pages. This is a proposal. So this is our guidelines for a proposal. Okay, so about 3,000 words. Some students will always want to know how many words. So that's just a rough idea. It could be more, it could be less, but generally your proposal should read like that. And then, of course, those are just the general formatting. In terms of referencing, we do use Harvard or APA. You should familiarize yourself with that. Choose one style and be consistent throughout. All right, so let me just go to the different elements of a proposal. So I'm going to use this chart just to give you a visual representation of how your proposal looks like. As you can see, you will have an intro. In the introduction there, we'll be dealing with what, how, why, and then it's kind of you're summarizing your proposal. And then the next session will be your literature review. Here in the literature review, the different kind of literature that you're going to explore. It could be the literature on that topic, and again, you'll also be required to review some literature on the theory or conceptual frameworks that you're going to apply in your study. The key essence of your literature review is to really find the hole that is missing, the gap, or the debates that are there, and being able to establish why your study is then going to help to fill this gap. And then your proposal is also required to have a methodology section where you discuss your design, your procedure, how data will be collected. That's where you discuss your ethics and all that. At this stage, you're not really expected to discuss any preliminary data or finding. You might just have a discussion on your analysis where you mention some of the analytical tools from your theoretical framework that you're going to use in the analysis. But unless you're doing a pilot study, then you might put, but it's really not a necessity, especially for a proposal. So the preliminary data would be kind of, if you are imagining maybe a qualitative study, then you might have ideas of themes that you want to explore in your study. So you might put those as your preliminary data, and others will put those, including the theoretical frameworks that may actually help as you try to envision your analysis. And then, of course, you will need to talk about the limitation and delimitation of your study. We're going to discuss that later. And then your conclusion, followed by references and any other requirement. In some department, they might want to see your research instrument, which is your questionnaire, or other tools that you're going to use to collect data. So this is the general, the pictorial representation, but then I'm going to now go step by step there. As you can see, so when you are looking at the first part that your proposal should begin is your introduction and the background to the problem. So here, depending again, it should cover about 1 or 2 pages, but it also depends with the template that your department uses. So in other department, they want the longer version, the others want just a short version. So it depends. So I'm just putting an average. So your intro background should be around that page. And what are you doing here? So here it's about providing an overview of your research project. And usually students of researchers are always advised, when you're providing an overview of this research, you need to start more broadly. We do not want you to start narrowly by maybe starting by defining. So let's say you're looking at something to do with assessment in education. So that is what I'm familiar with. So we want to examine the teacher's experiences of assessment. So I'm not going to start, for instance, by defining assessment in assessment is defined. That is not the kind of background that we want. We want you to really look at what are people saying more broadly, and it's really not even specific to South Africa, about assessment. What is this assessment and what impact does it have on education? So those are the general views that you provide when you try to contextualize your problem, and then from that, the broader, and it could be good to even try.
Sorry. And that's why it's itching. That's why it's itching, and the skin flares up. Oh. And also, she thinks now if she's not.
Shall I proceed?
Sorry about that. I think maybe the mic wasn't muted.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's proceed then. So in your introduction, like we said, you start more broadly. Try and contextualize the importance of your study. Why is your study important? What are the international perspectives of that study? So these have to do with the broader conception of the focus area. So you start more broadly before you narrow down. So if it is assessment, look at the broader conceptions of assessment internationally. These are key authors in the area. What are they saying about this concept that you want to research on? Okay. Then after you've started broadly, then you can come and narrow down. So in my case, if it is assessment, I will then narrow down. So in South Africa, what does the South African government do? Acknowledge assessment as an important aspect in teaching and learning, and they've even formulated a policy on it. And then I will actually quote the policy. So I've narrowed down. So I've moved from more broad to now narrowing down to the South African context. And that is what it meant. So here, try and focus on the major issues around this theme that you're looking at. So if it is assessment, what are the main issues that are there? And for us, we know now in assessment, mostly it's like teachers teach to the test. And assessment has a lot of issues because there's limited focus, maybe in terms of only teacher focusing on summative assessment and not formative. And we know that there's always a gap. And then we look at issues. Some of the issues is the class size that impact on the teacher's ability maybe to implement formative assessment, all right? So here you're trying to establish what is the gap then? What is the problem that is in this problem? And why does this study matter? Because your introduction is to try and convince the reader that your study does matter because you're contextualizing the importance of this aspect, but you're also problematizing it by identifying specific gaps that are there, all right? So in this section, you might want to end it with a purpose statement. So after you provide an international perspective, more broadly, you've narrowed it down, you've identified a gap, you want to end it with a purpose statement. So you say, of course, this study, the aim of this study is to establish the teacher's practices of assessment, blah, blah, blah. So you are ending the section with a purpose statement, right? So that is your introduction. So that is generally your introduction because normally students would in the introduction, they would want to define, they would want to list, and that is not the idea. The idea is to give a reader that you understand the broader conception of this concept more broadly before you even narrow it down. Then, so let me give you an example here. So let's say I was doing a research on exploring grade 10 English teachers' experiences in implementing an outcome-based education. So here you can see my interest will be what is the main issue here? It's about English. The grade 10 English teacher experiences in the implementing outcome-based education. So as you can see there, I'm interested in the English teachers. So I might want to begin by exploring what does this English teaching of English entail? What does it really entail when I want to teach English? And what knowledge do teachers need to be able to teach English? What are the challenges that are being experienced now? What is research saying about English in South Africa? And there you would want to even look at some of the results of the poor performing in terms of our learners not being able to read and write, and the international test being conducted, and people are being sensitized about that. So you might want to talk about all that. And so that is what it means when you look at your topic. When you want to really provide an introduction, make sure your introduction speaks to the key issues that you are going to be talking about. So in this case, the main thing that the researcher will be looking at is the English teacher's experiences. So you will find studies that speaks around English teaching. Just want to get the pointer there. So here, English teachers. So you might want to see that experiences. And then, of course, the other thing is about the implementation of this. So it's outcome-based education, which is OBE. So you might want to find what people are writing about OBE, and it could be local and international, but normally start with international before going local. So the next section now, after you have finished here your introduction and you've ended the section stating your research purpose, then you are going to state your problem statement, because that is important. And this is different from your background. Now, in your problem statement, what are you going to do? You're going to identify what is the problem, what is going wrong, all right? What exactly is a problem? And who is being affected? So let me give you back to my topic of assessment. What exactly is a problem? So my problem is the teachers are teaching to the test and not really teaching to help learners to understand or build up on their understanding. So that is my problem. Who does it affect? It affects learners because we can see even their performance, but more generally, it actually affects the broader curriculum, because if they're not being able to perform well in mathematics or in whatever because of poor assessment method, it will have a ripple effect in the subsequent grade. So for me, this is important, and you should be able to show the consequences of what what is going wrong is affecting, who is affecting, and the consequences. And it is important here for me to mention that normally as students, we don't want to do our work thoroughly, but the university has come up with measures that you need to find very current studies. Okay, so you must find at least at this point when you are starting your studies, you have to go and dig deep. You look in the past 5 years, which studies have been conducted in this area. So you will be required to at least reference not more than 10 years old work. So you need to be as current as possible. Why are we saying that? Because you might be wanting to do this study, but somebody has already done it. So what's the point? You see? So that's why we are saying you need to find at least three current studies, write a sentence of 2 for each in this section. What are they saying about that specific study? So you can briefly discuss their work, what they were studying, and you can also state some of their recommendations for further research about that specific problem. And then, of course, I'm going to give you an example here of a problem statement. I don't know if you can read that.
when the basic is that another person everything that's supposed to like prep themselves to report that you don't want to ask that is the same set of students that normally see that. All right, now let's look at here the first paragraph. As you can see there, I hope you've got, I was giving you time to read. So the problem to be addressed by this study is the decline of employee well-being for followers of novice mid-level managers and the corresponding rise in employee turnover faced by business leaders across financial services. So you can see the yellow there is stating what is the problem. He's saying this is the problem because this is the problem to be addressed. Now, who does it impact? It says there are low levels of employee well-being are toxic for who? For morale, and result is expensive turnover, dysfunctional work environment, anemic corporate, and blah, blah, blah. Can you see that? Then he is giving a value. He's trying, this is a problem and this is the effect. The third one in pink is trying to justify why this problem is a real problem, because you have other people who are equally experiencing the same problem, and they've done research in it and is validating that and is even giving evidence. As you can see there, there's a number there. He has given two a citation to support this assertion here, that the low levels of employee well-being are toxic and they influence turnover cost and work environment, etc., etc. So when you make such a statement, you need to validate it, because this is your problem statement. You need to say that this problem is not unique to me. There are other people who have actually studied it and they found that, yes, there is this problem is really, it's a real issue and it's affecting us. And then they are giving evidence. As you can see, according to Ufa gave a statistical evidence. There's a number. But then when you look at the next, the other ones that he described, they gave more qualitative data where they're saying what the low levels of employee well-being interrupt financial services. So you will need to back up some of your claims, especially when you are writing your problem statement. This is very, very important, to be able to validate your problem and to really make it a case and worthwhile to be studied. Then, of course, you will see he proceed to indicate in green there what the current literature is saying and the gap that is there. So he's saying that he has given all that background, but the current body of literature does not adequately address the well-being issue in the financial service industry. So he has already shown a gap. Here is the gap. So he's showing us, here is the gap that exists. So given this background, that is one of the gap. And then he says strategic direction flow top to down from senior executive passes through mid-level leadership to individual contributors at more junior stage, and continues to validate this gap. As you can see, they are giving more context and more example. Then there he concludes by saying that unless industry leaders better understand the phenomenon of employee well-being from the follower perspective, its role in positioning employee to provide premium client experience may be handicapped from preserving their most significant principal market differentiator. So he's trying to say that really this is a real problem, and unless it's fixed, this could be the consequences. So he's trying to convince the reader to say that, yes, this is a real problem and it needs to be addressed, because if you don't address it, these are the consequences. So generally, this is what you would expect in your problem statement. And then let me move on to the next section here, where you now write your research questions and objectives. So every proposal, there's a question that you're trying to address. Normally with our students, we try to make you, as soon as you develop your research topic, develop your question and your objective. It does help a lot because it makes you to remain focused, okay? So when you look at your research question, as you can see there, your research questions, of course, should link to your topic. It should link to the gaps that you've identified in your introduction and in your background section. It should be clear, it should be focused. And then, of course, your research objective, mostly it will be in qualitative study, because quantitative study, they will talk of hypothesis and all that.
So in qualitative study, I'm going to focus on that because that is my specialty. These would be a broad statement of the goals. And of course, the objectives will describe exactly what you expect to achieve by the project and cover what the research is attempting to find out, mostly in broad terms. But normally here, your research questions, you see that the FINER MAPS is an acronym, FINER MAPS, but that should actually guide you when you're developing your research question. It should be feasible. Feasible to mean that it is it's doable. You cannot say you want to, I remember when I wanted to do my master's, I wanted to do a study on assessment in Kenya. Then the question was, and how will you get to Kenya to interview these teachers? At that time, there was no Teams. And then I'm like, oh, okay, I can't. So then I had to change because it wasn't feasible. So you have to determine the feasibility of your study. Is it something that is feasible before once you develop your research question? Is it interesting? Will other people be interested? How do you get people interested? Your problem statement. Because again, your research question should speak to your problem statement. It should be novel, it should be something new. It should be ethical, and that is why you will be forced to apply for the ethical clearance. So you cannot be conducting a research that is not ethical. So the ethics committee of the university will be there to determine if your study is indeed ethical and if it will adhere to the ethical standard. It should be relevant. I mean, for instance, now we've moved on to 21st century. You could not be researching something on typewriters, the benefit of using typewriters. I mean, come on, who's using that? And then, of course, again, is it manageable within the time that you're given and the time that you have? You would want to do a lot of things. For instance, I remember, sometimes students become very ambitious. So they would want to collect data in all the schools in Gauteng, and then they would want to do interviews, document analysis, observation. It's impossible. There's no way you can manage that as a master's student. So that require more resources and more people. So you need to look at how able are you to manage. Then, of course, the appropriateness, the potential value, because you have to see value in your study, and then is it something that can be publishable? So I like to use that acronym, FINER MAPS, just to guide students when they are formulating the research questions and objectives. And then, of course, the other important thing is that you also, somewhere in your study, will need to talk about the significance of your research. Why is your research important? The significance has to link to your background. It has to link to, this is the rationale. Why are you doing this study? What is the rationale of this research? What is the potential benefits or the overall impact? Who is it targeted for? And what impact will it have? All right, so that is what you need to have a section where you actually say that, yeah, my study is important, and then it will speak to the potential value under the FINER MAPS. Yes, it does add value to the broader society because this is a problem that it will address, and these are the possible benefit that it has. So you will need to have a section. All right, so I'm going to pause there. I don't know if you have any question. Cecilia?
You can proceed, Doctor.
Good.
I'm following.
All right. I wanna, before I proceed to the next session, I want to show you a template. I wanna show you a template that I've downloaded and you might want to follow. I don't know, can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Good. So this is how your template, if it's a PhD, it will be PhD, whatever, but normally it will be like this. So like I said, I was preparing for a master's group in education, so I got something for them, but it will be something like this. And this is what I was discussing. You will be expected to write the background to the problem, okay? So you're gonna hear what is the contextual background. So that will be your subheading, introduction or background, context, okay? And then you will be able to be discussing what is the problem there, what does the literature say about this problem? So this is where we are going next, where you discuss your preliminary literature. And then you're going to end your section with the research questions, then followed by your aims and your objective. Okay, so for now, it will just be this section. And this is the shorter version of a proposal that a supervisor might want to use. There are others who prefer the longer version, which will be more elaborated than this, okay? So this, when I talk about the template, this is what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna move on to our slide. Okay, so the next section, as I showed you there in the literature review, and this is here, it will be somewhere here. What does literature say about this? As you can see, for some, so there are very different arguments. You do have a chapter in your main study that is dedicated for literature review. So you just have to get that straight. There is a chapter dedicated for that, but you are expected in your proposal to give a synopsis, an idea of what you think the literature, what kind of literature will you be exploring in trying to understand this problem? All right. So in this section, you will need to be looking at the literature around the topic that you've identified. It is always important to look at your heading and see which aspects can I investigate in literature. So your literature has to align to your topic, all right? So that is the section that I'll be talking about. And which kind of literature will you be exploring? So one, students, now we do have AI. And of course, we know the students want the shortcut. For me, this is always my advice. And we all, and I would like to encourage students to view it that way. AI or ChatGPT or Elicit or whatever bolt that you're using, please make sure that you use it in an ethical manner. You will be expected to review literature. It can be a good tool. For instance, ChatGPT can be your thinking partner. You can put it in a topic and then you instruct it to give you an idea of which kind of literature can you explore on this. But do not copy it word for word, because some of it cooks. I don't know whether to use the right word. It doesn't give you the real real literature. It fakes the references. It fakes, but it can give you an idea of what to explore. All right. But normally in a scholarly work, which your proposal is, every work that you cite should be peer reviewed. Now, ChatGPT is not peer reviewed. And when I read, I know that this is ChatGPT generated, and most of your supervisors will know, because we do have the ability to pick some of the things that are there in the AI generated texts. All right. So what do we mean when we say that it should be peer reviewed? Make sure that you get credible journal articles that are peer reviewed. So these are not the ones that you find. You can't find some that are open source on Google Scholar. Most work on Google is just, we don't know, anybody can dump. So in terms of it being peer reviewed, it means they're professionals who've sat down and really analyzed that work and established that, yes, it has adhered to the ethical standards, this is credible work, and they've validated it for publication. Okay, so where do we find such? You use the UJ database. University of Johannesburg pays millions to subscribe to databases. Do not rely on Google Scholar. Do not rely on Google. Some of the articles, you will see them on Google, but you cannot unlock them. But if you go through the UJ website, you should be able to find them. Now, in the event, and the library event today, they just told, we had a meeting with them today just before this session. They do normally have meetings where sessions where they teach students how to do literature review, how to access databases, how to reference, how to use EndNote. So take advantage of that. I would always recommend to any student, before you start your literature review, have the tools. What tools do you need? You need to know how to use to link your Google Scholar to your library. It's possible, right? So once you link it, it means that, yes, if UJ has access to it, by virtue of the fact that you're a UJ student, you equally have access to it. If you do not link it, you will not be able to access it. You need to know how to extract reference from the Google Scholar. You need to know how to reference using EndNote, because it makes your work easier. As you do your literature review, you're also collecting references at the same time, because I can assure you it's going to give you a headache if you've already written 20 pages and then now you want to start referencing. I'm not so sure how you're going to cope with that. So it's always advisable, as you write, you keep your reference list. And they've come up with this wonderful tool, which is EndNote. So make sure that whatever you cite from is peer-reviewed, is written by experts in the field. It is formal research, not Google. And all your citations have to be meticulously recorded and cited. And then, of course, your literature review should be developed over various paragraphs and sub-paragraphs. So you cannot just have a section and just writing, going. We don't even know where you're going. So it must be really paragraphed quite well, and make sure that each paragraph linked quite nicely with the other one, right? So some people will use a literature review as a subheading, others choose not to. So it just depends. This is always a debate, because anyway, for me, the idea is I'm almost doing literature review from beginning to end. So why should I use it? But people have different ways to just arrange things in their minds. And which type of literature review can you discuss here? So you're expected to do a literature review on the topic that you're studying, literature review on the theoretical approaches that you will be using to inform your study, if you use the theoretical approaches. And then you'll be expected to review literature on methodology that will serve in the methodology section. And then, of course, again, in your chapter 3 or 4, where you discuss your methodology. Now, to just point to you what we mean by the methodology section literature. If I take you here to the template, as you can see here, after you've written your aims and objectives, this is the section where you're supposed to design. It's a research design. The kind of literature that you're going to review here is very different from what you're going to review in this section. And that is what they're trying to say, that they're different kind of literature. So in this section, you will have literature for your topic. You will have a theoretical literature that frame your study. And then in the next section here, this is where you will have literature that is totally different about your research and design methods. So just keep that in mind as well. And then the next thing, the types of literature again, for you to look for. So we expect you to at least look for journal articles, books, and ebooks. So the same, depending. Sometimes the library has access to books, and sometimes it has access to ebooks. Reference books, you could have your dictionary, your encyclopedia. We also have, and these ones, they have a particular way of referencing. So you have to make sure that you reference it appropriately. So that is what we call the peer-reviewed literature. And then we also have these ones. These are gray literature. So they've not been peer-reviewed, but they are equally accepted. So when you talk about the government agent reports, it could be NGO white paper, it could be a dissertation. Yes, dissertation is not peer-reviewed. It's just your supervisor and examiner, but that doesn't mean it's been peer-reviewed. So this is considered gray literature, your annual reports for corporates. And then, of course, the idea here is that you really need to do a meticulous research that goes through the editing and peer review process of journals. So these ones, they do not go through that. And that is what they're trying to say. So the gray literature don't go through the peer review like the journal do. And then we have this other one, which is not literature, and you're being warned. If you want to use it with extreme caution. In fact, others will not accept it unless it's your unit of analysis, for instance. So maybe your study is about reviewing the blogs. What are the blogs saying, or newspaper, magazine, locating a particular theme? Maybe you might use that. But in terms of citing a magazine that according to this magazine, this is the problem, no. That is not considered credible source, so do not use it. Or if you have to use it, you must use it with extreme caution, because just know that you will be asked questions. And then I don't think I'll spend time here on your theoretical framework, but in education, we do, especially if you're conducting a qualitative study, we have the understanding that the problem that you're trying to solve, there is some theoretical framework that has been developed that can help you in analyzing it, okay? So I tend to use this, we call it the holistic approach model. Yeah, it was for the technology enhanced learning, but I find it quite useful. You need to be able to locate your study along this spectrum and try to think, who is going to help me explain what I'm trying to find out. So for us, we do use constructivism, we use connectivism. It depends which theoretical framework. You could be using Freire, critical pedagogy. So I'm not so sure. So I'm not going to go into details about this because this is very, very different, and especially the fact that, I mean, the one that we have here is in logistics. So I'm not so sure if this will make sense, but it's always good for a student to really come to the realization that, yes, you might need to draw on a theoretical framework and you need to be conversant with the different theories in the discipline and see which theory will align to your research and which conceptual tools are you going to draw on as you try to analyze your work. And that is expected as part of your proposal in the literature section just before your problem statement. And then, of course, we then move to your research methodology. In the research methodology, the first thing that you're expected to do here will be looking at your methods, your approach, your design, your data management and analysis, trustworthiness, validity, and then, of course, research ethics. So all these elements need to be part of your proposal. So you need to have a discussion on methods. You need to have a discussion on how you're going to manage your data and how you're going to analyze it. You need to have a discussion on how you're going to collect your data. I think I missed that. Collection of data. Discussion on trustworthiness. How are you going to ensure that your study is really trustworthy, is credible, is dependable, is transferable, okay, is conformable. And then you need to also indicate which ethical standards are you going to adhere to. So I like to use this. I've always used it with my student and also with myself. It always just makes it easy for me. I'm able to see my study at a glance. And this is a framework that was developed by Saunders. So Saunders says that he views research as an onion, with each layer peeling and building on each other. So as you can see there, the outer layer being the bigger picture where you locate your study. Is your study an interpretive study? You need to find out, what is that? Is your study a qualitative study or quantitative? Is it inductive? Is it deductive? Which research strategy are you going to use? Which data collections are you going to use? What will be your data analysis method based on your data collection tools? So for me, I like using the Onion framework because it just always gives me a glimpse of, and it frames my mind. I mean, once you're able to do this as a student, you do have clarity on exactly what you're going to do. So I always encourage my student, I want to see your research onion. What are you going to do? What is in your top outer layer? What is your philosophy? What is your design? And that design should align to your approach. Then what is your strategy? What are your collection methods? How are you going to analyze your data? So once you have that, then you are ready. You really know your study and you've captured all the details. So you will need to discuss all these elements in your research methodology sections. And then the other area that is also important, you will need to write about your trustworthiness. So for trustworthiness, that is for qualitative data. If your study is more quantitative, you might want to talk about reliability and validity. If it is qualitative, we do not talk about reliability and validity. Rather, we talk about trustworthiness. Now, here I'm giving you a comparative chart. So on the right, top right, which is a naturalistic term, we talk of qualitative study. If you want to establish the truth value, if the findings that I have are truthful, then we talk about credibility. And you need to tell the readers, how are you going to ensure that your data that you're established and the findings that you're presenting is credible? Because people can cook data. People can cook it, but how are you going to ensure that the data that you're going to provide is credible? For quantitative, they'll be talking about internal validity, and they do have quantitative measures to establish that. Now, the other thing that we talk about is applicability. Okay, now I've done my study here. How applicable is it in the next content? In qualitative, we talk about transferability. How can my study be generalized? You see, I conducted it in South Africa. Can it still be conducted in another context? And you need to, because ideally your study should be transferable. That is because that also enhances the trustworthiness of your data, because it means there was rigor. There are certain measures that you need to learn on how you're going to apply, and you need to review literature on that. And then we also have another thing, which is consistency. You need to ensure that your study is consistent. How will you determine that? For quantitative, they talk about reliability. My research is reliable, but when we talk about qualitative, we talk about it's dependable. And there are measures that you need to apply, and you need to write it again in your proposal. This is what I'm going to do to ensure that my study is dependable. And then the last one is about confirmability. Can it be confirmed? How objective is it? It's about neutrality of your work, you see? And so some of the people that I would suggest you read around, there's Likon and Guba, I've given them. Then there is Saunders on Research Onion. And these are people that have really written extensively about research methodology. We also have Creswell. So I think might draw a list just to give you an idea of who to read when you are thinking about your research method. Any question? Cecilia? Are you all good? Did I make you sleep?
I'm good, doctor. Just proceed.
Ask me a question now. Maybe I'm throwing a lullaby. I've been talking for too long. I need a water break, so you need to talk. What don't you understand?
Doctor, I'll take you back at the problem statement.
Okay.
So where my problem is.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Especially in identification of the problem, you can find that the problem has the sub-problems, other problems which are causing the major problem.
Yes.
So how are you going to address it? Are you concentrating with the major problem, or even you can explain the minor problems which are causing the major problem?
I think you might want to, you have to explain, because especially for PhD, the PhD goes for depth rather than breadth. For PhD, it has to be very deep. So if when I said, if my focus is on assessment, all right? There might be other issues. Okay, let me give you an example of what I did for my PhD, because master's was a bit shallow. So on PhD now, I was looking at the experiences of rural students in accessing university education. Can you see that that's a problem?
Yeah.
But it looks like it's a general problem, but there's so many other problems in it. When I'm stating my research problem, I have to bring in all other problems. For instance, the one issue is policy. Policy is a problem. There was no policy that is geared towards, because those are the justification. If you see these slides here, your smaller problems will feed into you justifying that big problem. So you're going to write authors who've researched on the smaller problems and how they're validating it, contributing to the bigger problem. So that will form part of the purple where you're actually validating. This is the problem, and this is how it impacts, or that is how it's brought about, and this is what other authors are saying about it. You see, or some of the causes, and that is why it should be addressed, because there's so many elements that are building onto it. So for PhD, you have to talk about all that, but look at more substantive problems that you are able to really go for depth, because there are some problems that I don't know, but you will really have no control over, or even in terms of literature. So look for things that are really going to add strength to your argument. Not every problem, you cannot solve all the problems, unfortunately. So you have to also, that is another section. You have to limit your study, because I remember when I did mine, they say, yeah, but why are you focusing? Because your issue is about access in education. Why rural students? I'm like, why not urban? I'm like, no, the scope of my study can only allow me to focus on rural students. Somebody else can do urban. So you also need to know your study and be able to defend it. Don't allow people to force you to take on other sub-problems, all right? So your study might only be focused on one, and you really need to validate it. You cannot solve all the problems. That is what, in fact, the problem that you're going to solve is minute in the broader picture, you know? And we normally come with this idea, you think, I'm going to solve this problem. That's what I thought when I do this study. UJ will adopt my conceptual framework, and next year all rural students will be fine. No, there are layers and layers. For me, the other layers that was contributing to this is the rural, where the location, geography. Now, how can I solve that problem? Okay, the other issue is the rural schools where they're coming from, and the teachers, they don't have exposure to even careers. There's nobody to guide them. You see, so it's multi-layered. So you'll find that your big problem has several layers into it, and you need to bring it up to be able to really ground and to show that, yeah, that is where you actually say, this is the significance of my study, because it's multi-layered. There's so many layers to it, and we need to address it. Because if you do not address it, the ripple effect is the following, you see. So yeah, so that is my feedback. I don't know if I've answered you.
Yeah, Doctor, thank you so much.
All right.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. I'm almost done, unless you have any question. So I don't know, what is your study about? What are you thinking about? Have you started thinking?
Yes, Doctor. My study is on logistics management practices, digitalization, and healthcare service delivery. So I'm linking the logistics, digitalization, and service delivery.
That is nice, because it's relevant. It's crisp, it's topical. So because it's topical because you're talking about 4IR. That's music to everybody's ears, you know. It's publishable. If I may ask, is it a qualitative or quantitative?
It's mixed.
It's going to be a mixed
pragmatic
study.
Yeah.
Oh, so it is pragmatic. Okay, good. So that it means most of the things that I'm talking about will be applicable to you, because you have to mix the two.
Yes,
all right?
Doctor, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So perfect. So then I think so then it's okay for me to continue then on this part. That's what I wanted to establish. So because this is the last section that I'm doing in terms of your proposal, what you need to some of the strategies that you could employ when you want to enhance your trustworthiness for qualitative study. So in terms of enhancing the credibility, which is the truthfulness of your data, there we normally talk of prolonged engagement. So you will want to prove to the data that, no, I did have extended engagement with my participants. Maybe I did not only collect data once, I went to them twice, or maybe the interview lasted for the following, or I had a follow-up interview with them, or after the interview, we did focus group. So this was kind of prolonged because I was able to engage with the same group of people over a long period of time. And then some would talk to you about the peer briefing. After you've collected your data, you actually go, you come to your peers and you tell them, this is what I have, what do you think? Then they give you feedback. You can also have triangulation, where you triangulate your data. You don't only collect it through one source, because whatever you collect here, it's validated using that other method. Whatever they say in the interview validates what you observe. So that is triangulation, or it could be triangulation via your method, your theory, and your literature. You are triangulating, or sometimes it's member checks. And then in terms of transferability, here we talk about providing this rich description about your research method. So that's why your research method section has to be really well described. And of course, purposive sampling will be able to give people the idea of how they can transfer it to another context. And then I've also, in terms of dependability, you can do audit trail, create an audit trail using softwares. If you use SPSS, or for quantitative, we use Atlas DI, or no, it depends what you use. And then for conformability, you also talk of triangulation. So I don't know whether you've noticed across the board that triangulation really does enhance trustworthiness of your study, even reliability, because you are collecting your data using different sources. And that is very important. So it's always encouraged that make sure that I like your study, the fact that it is mixed. So it means your triangulation is going to really enhance the trustworthiness and reliability since you're using a pragmatic approach. So yes, the other thing that you also need to discuss is the limitation, and this is where your question comes in. You need to provide a justification. Yes, this problem, there are many other problems, and you need to match them because it's a PhD. But my study is only limited to the following. Okay, and that is where normally there's always a joke, and I'm sure you're gonna come across it very soon. We use that a lot. I use it. I just finished my review and I use that statement a lot. So when you get a reviewer, in my case, so the reviewer said, but why did you focus only on rural students in South Africa? Why couldn't you focus, in Africa? But I'm like, no, the scope of my study only allowed me to do the following. They can never say anything about that because it is the scope. So it's always a defensive thing. Make sure you have a scope you are able to justify. And the scope of the study can be influenced by so many factors in terms of even finances, resources, So you just justify, this is what I'm going to focus on, and that I cannot solve all the problems. And you feel that it could be geographical. You only want to, or the sample size that will allow you because of what you have, or the time, or the geographical area. For me, it was both the time and the resources. There's nowhere I was going to, because I only focused on rural students in the University of Johannesburg, and to do the matters worse, it was only Faculty of Education 8 and Faculty of Engineering 12. So if they want to pin you down, they can, but I'm like, no, this is qualitative study, and the scope of my study only allows me to do this, because of the depth because I'm going to collect different sources of data, and I do not have the capacity to really analyze that. Once you provide that delimitation, it always covers you. Then you will also, and that is important to form part of your proposal, you also need to explain the limitation of your study. So remember, these are different, delimitation and limitation. Some people would like to combine them, but I like to separate, because when you talk about the delimitation, this is about the justification of the scope of your study and the choice for why you've made that choice, all right? But when it comes to limitation, this is about the shortcomings, all right? So they are linked, but they're different. I don't know if I'm making sense. So because, so when I talk about delimitation, let me say these are things that you as a researcher have control over. So I have control of the number of sample size, okay? I have control of the time. I have control of where I want to conduct my study because of convenience and whatever, but I do not have control of funding, maybe. And in some time, I could have control over time, but I may not have control over time at the same time, because my time is determined by the number of years that I spend in my PhD, you understand? So I cannot say I'm going to do a longitudinal study for 10 years, yet I'm supposed to finish my PhD in 4 years. So I don't have control over that. So it depends. So when you talk about limitation, you also need to really think what exactly is going to limit you, and it's different from the limitation. So yeah. So then, of course, you're not going to have any conclusion there. I think for your study, it will end with the ethical clearance measures. In some, they will require you to draft a budget, or you explain how long will your study take, the deadline. So this is a requirement for others, but it may not really be a requirement for some. So I'm not going to spend time with that. And then, of course, at the end, you also need to have a list of references and have it. I tell people the first shortcut is Google Scholar. If the article is available on Google Scholar, just click cite, get your reference in, make sure that it aligns, that's it. There are other softwares. There's Mendeley. UJ used to have RefWorks. Then we had Mendeley, and then they've deleted it. So now I know we are using EndNote. I haven't yet known how to use it. I know how to use RefWorks and Mendeley, but they've discontinued them. So I'm still stuck, and I'm relying on Google Scholar and my own knowledge, but I need to make time. But I think it's a good thing for you to get to use EndNote. if you have time, so that as you build your literature, make sure you also have your endnotes somewhere. But that will only be one way of collecting your references. Please have a plan B, because some of these can really affect you. Okay, yeah, all right. Yes. Hold on. All right, so any questions about that? I think I've come to the end of my presentation, so I'm gonna open for more. If you have any questions, comments, suggestion.
Okay, Doc, thank you so much for the presentation.
Yeah.
I think it was very insightful, very informative, and very clear and concise session. I have a question here in the chat box. The question is, what is the meaningful sample size for a qualitative study?
Well, that you have to validate it in terms of your study. You have to really validate it. There are people who've written about it. For recently, I was writing an article, and I conducted an interview, which is qualitative study, for about 8 teachers. And they questioned that. They say, can you validate this? And then when you read literature, they say, no, actually, it should be between 8 and 15, because remember, when you're doing, but it depends. Some say minimum 15, but there are other people who say 8 is equally fine, depending if you're going to triangulate it. And I was triangulated, so I was able to justify it that way. But to be safe, rather work from about 15, nothing more. This is qualitative data. And here I'm talking about you're conducting interviews. So I can assure you, if you conduct an interview with one person for 30 minutes, it will take you about 6 hours to transcribe that data. So you think, do you want to do interview for 50 people? Think again. I don't think you have the resources and the time. Okay. For the ones that I was conducting interviews for 1 hour, and it would take me 8 hours. I transcribed my own data, and you don't want to do that. So you are also limited in terms of the resources. Unless you have money, you can pay other people to do it for you, but I don't trust them, because I did use them once. And so really, I would say you have to really be careful. Look at the scope of your study, look at the different methods that you're going to collect data, because all that will inform the ideal number. But in terms of quantitative, less is more, so long as that less will give you more depth. So make sure safe number between 10 and 15. If you're more ambitious, you can go 20. But yeah, just a warning, it takes a lot of time to do data. For my master's, I did 8, and it was acceptable. For PhD, I did 18. It was acceptable because I was doing other things. I was doing document analysis. I was doing focus groups. So that will depend on the different data collection methods in order for you to really validate your sample size. Yeah. But if it's quantitative, we know there is a formula. You have to follow the sampling formula. There is a rule, and I think your sample size is determined with the population, and there is a way they calculate the sample size in quantitative. I'm not quite conversant with that. I'm learning slowly on how to do that. Is there any question?
Yes, Doc, there is another question in the chat box. It says, how many instruments must be used to collect qualitative data?
Again, it depends. It depends, and what really matters is the trustworthiness of your data. When we talk about how are you going to establish the truthfulness of your data or trustworthiness, if you want to have more rigor, then it is advisable to have several data collection methods to validate and triangulate your data. So for instance, you could do individual interviews, and then you could triangulate it with a focus group. And then you could triangulate it maybe with a document analysis, or some would actually triangulate it with a literature survey or literature review. So it actually really depends. For other people, depending on the extent of your study, they will do only one. But this one, they will do not semi-structured interview, they will do interviews, which are more like narrative, or some will do shadowing. So they could even do a shadowing with only one person, and that could be a longitudinal study. Maybe you want to shadow a principal and to see, you can shadow them for about 3 years, and it is allowed. So I don't really have a straight answer to say that this is what you must use. It actually depends on what you want to find in your study. And that you need to be in conversation with your supervisor who will address you, who will assist you, especially given their area of expertise. That he is the right person to really advise you. But one thing that you need to be cautious of is the triangulation and the trustworthiness, reliability of your data. So if you wanna do only one, if it's only 8 interviews, then you may not have depth and you might have issues with triangulation. And that might affect the credibility, because if you were to publish this work, they will ask, but how credible is this work? Did you validate your findings in some other way? So that it depends. If you do a mixed study, it's always safe. There you've got no issues, because you can do questionnaire survey, and then from the questionnaire survey, you are able to develop some questions for your semi-structured interview, and then in that way, you are safe. You are able to, at least in some way, triangulate it. You could triangulate it with the literature and with the theory, and then you're fine. Any question?
Yes, there is another question. So it says, can I use more than one theory in my study, and what are the consequences?
Yes, you can. I used 4. But this is the idea. Let me tell you, because this is what people normally say. You're not confined to a particular theory. Again, it depends. For qualitative studies, we are not testing theory. We are developing theory. So it's more open. For quantitative, they're different, because then they're actually testing theory. They normally have this framework that is already developed, and maybe their framework come from different conceptual frameworks or theoretical framework. But for us, we are developing theory as we move on. So I'll give you an example. So when I was looking at my study about rural students, because when I give something that I've done, I think it makes more sense. One of the theories that I used was the Bourdieu. It was a good theory because it was helpful to help me to see how students navigate issues of class and all that. But then way in, I'm like, but this theory, it's okay. It's helping me to explain certain things, but not others. So it's limited. And I brought that up. I said, this theory is going to help me to analyze 1, 2, but it cannot help me to analyze 3 and 4. So to analyze 3 and 4, I'm bringing in the next theory, which is Love and Wenger, okay? Because theory, this is limited. So I moved to another theory. And then I'm like, okay, this other theory can also help me to analyze 4, 3, and 4, but not 5 and 6. So I need another theory to explain that. So in the end, I had something that we called a conceptual framework, because I'm using different concepts from different theories to explain my study. Does that make sense? So I ended up using in fact, I had one that I did not use for analysis at all, because again, that is the other thing. You need to know which theory are you going to use for analysis, or do you want a theory just as a normative guide? I had a theory that is a normative guide, something that guides your thinking to the norms and the ideals of this world. For me, that theory was social justice. I did not use it for analysis, but I just use it to frame my study around this idea of education for social justice. We need education, and when we look at education, we need to think of it as a means to achieve social justice. And for me, that was a theory that I used as a normative guide, not necessarily for analysis, and I had to say that. So I have this theory, it's just for analysis, for normative guide, not really for analysis. For analysis, I'm going to use 1, 2, 3, and 4. And these are the conceptual tools that I'm going to draw from this theory in my analysis. And if you do that, you need to state that in your proposal. Remember there under the literature review, I said you need to talk about your theoretical frameworks. You will need to unpack that these are the theories that you're going to draw on. Theory 1 will help you to analyze 1 and 2. That's what they were talking about, preliminary data. Theory 2 will help me to analyze 3 and 4. Theory 3, like that. So you need to explain what are you going to use and how are they going to help you. Any other question?
There is no question in the chat box. Just a statement saying thank you, Doc, for the informative session. So at this moment there is no question and there is no hand raised.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for attending. Oh, and the number went up. How many do we have?
Yes, we had about 3 attendees. 3 attendees.
Okay.
So, yes.
Thank you so much. So let me switch on my camera and say thank you. I have to rush to another meeting. So thank you so much for coming, and I wish you all the best in your studies. Good luck.
Okay,
Thank you so much, Doctor.
All right. Bye.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
And please don't forget to fill in the feedback survey in the chat box. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye. Enjoy the rest of your day.